Okay, folks, I guess we'll go ahead and get started now. The mayor is going to be done soon. She can just join us when she's finished. So anyway, thank you all for coming tonight. The reason we're here is to discuss Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch and how you guys can get a group started in your subdivision, on your block, in your part of the Palmer area. So first of all, how many are here for the business portion of this meeting? Okay, and how about the neighborhood portion of the meeting? All right, real fine. And how many of us are inside the city limits of Palmer? How many of us are Palmer residents? Either one. Yeah, you don't count, Dusty. So, okay, great. Well, very, very happy to meet everybody. I'm glad you're here tonight. If you want to, feel free to come forward. If not, that's okay if you like your personal space. My name is Lance Ketterling. I'm the chief of the Palmer Police Department. I've been here for about 22 years. To my left is Commander Dwayne Shelton. He's been here about as long as I have. Between the two of us, we can do the job of one normal man. In the back, helping us out as well, are Miss Julie and Miss Hillary from the Palmer Police Department. They have some materials that you guys can collect up for later on after the meeting. And next to them are Miss Belinda and Mr. Eric, and they are here on behalf of Matsu Crime Stoppers, which is kind of a program which works hand in hand with Neighborhood Watch. The goal of both of these is to reduce criminal activity in our neighborhoods and in our town and to help people feel safer. And we'll talk about how we're going to go about doing that. So, by way of background, one of the reasons we're doing this is that Alaska in general, certainly not Palmer specific, but Alaska in general, and in fact the lower 48, the country in general, is going through an uptick in certain types of criminal activity. And specifically how we're seeing that manifest here in town is an increase in property crimes. Things like theft, to a degree, things like criminal trespassing, to a degree, things like burglary. Those things have all been on the rise for the last several years. As a matter of fact, in 2017, we had the highest amount of thefts in Palmer that we had in the last 5. And I think we had about 275 of them. So about 2 out of every 3 days, there was a theft going on in Palmer. That dropped a little bit in 2018, and we were very happy to see that. It is not the highest amount that we had in the past 10 years. For example, 2008, we had more thefts in Palmer. We had over 300. And that kind of brings me to a point about how crime happens in Palmer. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but crime in Palmer is person-centric. It's not so much location-centric, with a few exceptions. And by that I mean a lot about criminal activity can be determined by who's in town or which little group of criminals have decided to take a more active role. So in larger areas, particular urban areas, you might see an increase in activity around industrial areas, large commercial areas, that sort of thing. With Palmer, we're close enough and the population is able to walk enough and get around enough the city that we see criminal activity based on this individual has moved into town. By example of that, in 2009, we had a serial burglar that had moved in from Montana. That raised our burglary numbers out of all recognition when he was going up and down South Alaska Street. And I think Kelly worked on this case, as a matter of fact. Kelly Turney, by the way. He worked on that case, and it about doubled our number of burglaries that we typically experience in a year. It went up to about 40. And normally we're in about, a dozen and a half or so, maybe 30 burglaries. But this went way, way through the roof because of one individual. And they can do a lot of that in just 1 or 2 nights. The amount of cars that one person can break into in one night, or the amount of businesses that a person can get into in one night, is pretty high. And they can create a lot of victims in a short amount of time. And that's where these things like Neighborhood Watches come in. It's increased vigilance on the part of the community. So just a little bit about statistics. I'm not going to bore you too much with this, and I don't want to turn this into a statistical discussion too much. But again, we were down a little bit in thefts for 2018 compared to 2017. Assaults were about the same. We had 92 of them compared to 97 the year before. Disturbances, right around the same, almost 400. Criminal trespassing was through the roof. And one of the reasons for that is because we have a significant population of homeless individuals. We have a significant population of people that are battling some severe mental health issues. And these people self-identify all over town. Many of you have probably seen them. And some have gotten to the point where there's really hardly an open business anymore where they are allowed to go back to. These people don't have any visible means of support. they don't have a place to live. And so they wind up getting trespassed from a lot of these locations, but they still go back either because they don't remember or they don't care, and we wind up arresting them for criminal trespassing. And that's probably the reason for that. There's been a couple of hundred of those in 2018. Very busy year for criminal trespassing. And I think the homeless population, the mental health population, it's pretty well seen, it's been pretty well discussed, but it's large and it's growing. And so, yes, from the police department's perspective, that is a concern of ours. Drug numbers are about the same. The types of drugs are changing to a degree, and there's a variety of different reasons for that. Opiate use continues to be high. And so we are still in the midst of an opiate issue. It's not as bad as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still there. Methamphetamine, on the unfortunate other hand, is coming back, and it's coming back fairly big. There have been some very large seizures of methamphetamine around the state. There was a very large seizure here in Palmer late last year. It was the first key-level seizure that we had ever made. Key is 2.2 pounds, by the way, which is enough to keep Palmer screwed into the ceiling for a good couple of weeks. So, yeah, it's been a busy time for methamphetamine as well, and that's back. These people also self-identify, and neighborhood and business watches can help us find those individuals and make good cases against them. And then sex offenses mercifully remain relatively low. We deal with about 2 dozen of those a year. That doesn't really seem to be affected so much at all by the usual trends of drug use or homelessness or mental health. Those always stay about the same. They go up and down largely by who's reporting. In other words, there are a great many of those that are probably underreported. We try to get the kiddos, most of the time it's kids, to report quite a bit, but they don't always do it. So it's just how do they have someone that they can talk to? They did go up a little bit, and I think one of the reasons for that is we have a school resource officer now, and she's bonding with these kiddos at school, and that's making a big difference because they have somebody now that they know is safe for them to report to, when other times that hasn't been the case. So we're very thrilled with that position. So that is the situation as it lies in Palmer at the moment, and those are the crime trends. And so let's talk a little bit about Neighborhood Watch or Business Watch. So what are these programs designed to do, and what are they not designed to do? So fundamentally, at their core, the police are the public, and the public are the police. Robert Peel said that, and he's the one who's basically responsible for modern police work. He was a British man, English something over there on that side of the pond. Anyway, he was a very unique individual, and that was his statement. And fundamentally, that's the truth, especially here in Palmer. We've practiced community-oriented policing since I've been here for the last 2 decades, simply because there was no other way. Palmer's very small. We didn't have a lot of specialized units. And by the time you had been here for 5 or 10 years, you had been in enough houses and enough businesses that you knew the vast majority of people in town. And that's the exact goal behind community-oriented policing. Where Neighborhood Watch comes in is helping us get increased information and an increased exchange between the community and the police department so we can identify these problems quicker and solve them long term. And that's what we're really looking for. Short-term solutions, sometimes we have to do those. An arrest for disorderly conduct, a sleep off in a rehabilitation center or a drunk tank. We really want to fix the problem long term so it doesn't reoffend. Okay? So the goal primarily is to prevent crime. With Neighborhood Watch, that's the goal. We want to prevent crime, we want to increase a feeling of safety, and increase the standard of living in town. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Palmer's already a wonderful place. We live here as well. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law lives here in town. She's over there. She came to the last one, too. She's trying to intimidate me right now. But it's a great place to live, and we have a high standard of living. We do have a sense of community. But we can't really kind of just rest on laurels and expect that to continue, because that can become problematic. New groups of people moving in can change the culture of a place very, very quickly. And so our goal is to maintain good, positive relationships and build good, healthy neighborhoods. And that kind of brings me to a point. The key word in neighborhood is Neighborhood Watch. It isn't watch, it's neighborhood. So this is kind of the goal of this meeting is to get several groups started throughout the city of Palmer. One group for the city of Palmer, it's far too big. You can't get to know everyone in the city of Palmer as a resident. What you can do is get to know your neighbors on your couple of blocks or on your subdivision or on 2 or 3 streets. And then you can build those relationships where you know who belongs or who might be out of place, what's suspicious, what isn't suspicious, who's gone on vacation. who has kiddos that are having problems and might need a little bit of extra supervision. Those are the kinds of relationships we're trying to build. And from that, you can move on to things like, okay, we want to get together as a block and have a block cleanup, because unkept, trashed cars, broken buildings attract crime, but clean areas tend to push crime somewhere else. So you can have block cleanup parties, just block parties in general. You can get together a group and figure out if there's a charity you like in town that you maybe want to donate to and give some support behind. But all these kind of relationship building activities where people get together and try to do positive things for the community, those are the goals. We want to increase accurate information exchange between the police department and the citizens. And accurate really is the key. We'll cover more about that later. So, how do we start one of these? And folks, by the way, if you have any questions at any point in time, just go ahead and raise your hand. Shout it out. I'll repeat it so the radio station can hear it, and we'll answer them as they come up. And then when we're done, we'll have a question and answer period afterwards as well, and then we'll pass out some materials. So, determine if there's a need is one of the first things that we need to do. So how many think that there's a need for improved or just brand new neighborhood watches in their area? So, and I tend to agree with you. And there's a variety of different reasons for that. One is we hear an awful lot at the police department that people are experiencing an increased amount of fear just walking to the store or simply being outdoors. They're afraid of their neighbors. They're afraid of people they don't know walking down the street. And there can be a number of different reasons for that. But what we want to do is dispel that fear and get people to understand that it's still a safe place to live and you're not powerless. And a lot of times that's where fear comes from. It's just a simple sense that you don't have any power, you don't have any control over your own existence, you don't feel safe. And one of the things that you can do when you have a strong community is get past that. So you do have a choice. You have a way to positively affect things. You're not powerless. So if we're going to start a neighborhood watch, about 4 weeks out, one of the first things you want to do is start going around to neighbors and meeting them door to door, face to face, and talking to them about setting up a meeting date and time. Now, I can't encourage this enough. I have no issues with Facebook whatsoever. I have no issues with social media whatsoever. But Neighborhood Watch works best when people are meeting face to face. That's what we found over and over again. And part of that is because the information exchange tends to be a little bit freer, a little bit more accurate, and you get to know somebody as a person rather than just a screen on a social media app. Nothing wrong with social media. This is just a different way that we're trying to accomplish this. And it's a face-to-face thing. You know people, not a profile picture. Okay? Does that all make sense? Okay. So 4 weeks before you're going to have your first meeting, start going around and talking to folks. 3 weeks out, it might be a good time to start ordering materials. And that could be some of the handbooks like we have over there. We'll pass those out later. But if you do need to order more, about 3 weeks out, that's about how long it takes them to show up. Come to us. Ask us where you can get them, and if we can't order them for you because our budget is shot, because we don't get enough money. That was directed at the mayor. If our budget is shot, we can at least tell you where to order these things so you can get your own materials, and that'll help a lot. But it does take a few weeks for those things to arrive. About 2 weeks out, come see us, because we want to attend your meetings. So we will be happy to attend all of these that we're invited to. The only thing that's going to keep us away is an emergency that we have to respond to something else. Usually it's if it's a real person-on-person thing. But we want to come to your meetings. And part of the reason is we want to be able to talk to you about what we're seeing from our patrol cars and our contacts with the community. And we need to hear what you guys are seeing about your neighborhood, because you know your neighborhood better than we do. We'd like to think we know them fairly well, and the reality is we kind of do. But we don't see everything you guys see. And we can't fix problems that we don't know are broken. So here's where that information exchange. Yes, ma'am. If you don't live in the city, contact Miss Belinda over there, and she will talk to you about how to get in touch with that. If you do live in the city, 745-4811, extension 2, and that will get you Miss Julie. And she will put you in touch with me or Commander Shelton, and we will be happy to come to your meetings. So. But give us a couple of weeks just so we can plan. About 1 week prior to when you want to have your meeting, it's time to start sending out flyers to your neighbors. Maybe go deliver them hand in hand, door to door, that type of thing. Just a reminder. And also talk about who's going to be bringing what. And bringing what, I don't want to make this too much of a social issue, but turning it into something that's enjoyable is really important for keeping these meetings going long term. If they're boring and someone like me just sits up and talks to you all night, then pretty soon people are going to lose interest in that and they're not going to want to show up. But if Ethel, who makes the best banana pudding on the planet, is bringing the banana pudding to the next neighborhood watch meeting, we're going to get a lot more people attend because, frankly, Ethel's banana pudding is a heck of a lot bigger draw than Chief Lance, who's boring. So do get to know each other and make these things into something that's actually fun. You can do that, and you can still have a great exchange of information and a great neighborhood watch meeting, but it's not dull. It looks for something that people actually enjoy going to. So it's kind of a social event where there's an agenda and something actually positive happens. So that's pretty important for keeping these things going. So about 2 days prior, give us a confirmation call that you're still going to have it. Let us know, or we'll reach out to you and maybe reach out to the folks as well that are going to be going and just reconfirm, okay, we're going to be at Bob's house and it's going to be on Tuesday night and it's going to be at 7 o'clock. It's going to last about an hour, and afterwards we can hang out and chat or do whatever. So, and just kind of reconfirm the meeting dates. And then have the meeting. For the first couple, it's going to be a good idea to spend a little bit of money, or maybe even not. So most people are really crafty. I don't happen to be one of those, but name tags, a way to identify each other so you know where each other lives, that sort of things. And then you have your meetings. Keep them relatively short, about an hour, maybe an hour and a half or so, something like kind of what we're trying to do here tonight. Although we may go quicker if nobody asks me any interesting questions. And then as far as the meet, yes, Tim. So over what time frame? In the history of the world, so 5 years, there's probably been 2 or 3. Those which are actively meeting down, we're probably down to 1 or none. And that's one of the issues about keeping these things healthy and keeping them going, is we as people lead very busy lives, and we have a lot going on. And the tendency is that when things seem to get better, we lose interest in stuff that is no longer mission critical for us and what we're trying to do. And so the interest in these things kind of drops away. I really strongly suggest that if that's getting to be the case, at least quarterly, you just have get-togethers and meetings and sit and talk, even if there's not much to discuss, but just to keep some type of interest in that regularity of having meetings. Because getting people back together can be a challenge. Sometimes they've failed, maybe that's not the right word. Sometimes they have dissolved because the key people that were involved in getting them together have moved. That's a big issue, and then someone needs to step up and take that role. So if you guys were having a neighborhood watch meeting, what are some of the things you would want to talk about? Anybody? Julie? Yeah. So that's a great question. Subdivision at biggest. So, maybe Cedar Hills. And that's getting a little bit big because Cedar Hills is a pretty big subdivision. Brittany Estates, something like that. Those are at the most. Often they're just a few blocks. It's usually there's some type of natural either road or geographic or some other identifiable boundary that kind of sets aside a particular group. But like a great example would be maybe Cranberry Meadows over by south of the grade schools. That would be a good sized subdivision group for a neighborhood watch. Or like maybe in between Alaska and the Glen Highway and then Eagle and Arctic, that type of area. So a few blocks, a subdivision at the most, that's what we're kind of looking for. So, and that actually covers a surprising amount of people depending on which area you're talking about. So we have our meeting. We've got people to show up. What are we going to talk about? Dusty, what do you want to talk about? Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, especially for the first meeting, it's what are we seeing as a community that we're concerned about, because there are concerns. So along those lines, that kind of goes to the information sharing part of this. And again, I cannot stress this enough. The information that we share needs to be accurate, or at least as accurate as we can make it. The worst thing that happens with police departments is we get sent off. It's not the worst. A bad thing that happens to police departments is we wind up chasing our tails on leads that are not necessarily accurate. We have a teenager that's trying to get attention. We have somebody with the best of intentions that's trying to report something, but they didn't see the whole thing. We have somebody that's giving us a call out of fear and taking a problem and magnifying it out of all proportion to what it really is. Those cause us to divert resources under the best of circumstances that could be used for something else. Under the worst of circumstances, it's a complete false police report, and that can result in criminal charges. And we see all of those from time to time. We see more on the social media pages, and that's because there's a degree of anonymity involved in that, right? You can type pretty much whatever you want, and nobody might know who you are. So we need to be cautious. And as a police department, we try to trust as much as we can, but especially when it comes to us via Facebook or some anonymous source, we verify, because we don't have the time or the resources to be chasing around false leads. So accurate information, objective information, is really, really important. And that's one of the things that we can do for you on some of your first meetings is how do we impart accurate information to the people that need to know it? If I call the business line or if I call 911, what is it they want to hear? Okay? So, and that's a great topic for discussion. So when they're trying to do that, typically what it is they're doing, the officers are looking for what's called probable cause if they're going to be making an arrest. Probable cause is reliable information in sufficient detail that would convince a reasonable person a crime has been committed and that the suspect is the one who committed it. It's a lexiconal definition of probable cause that the courts use every day. And so that's what the officers need to build. Reliable information, sufficient detail that a crime's been committed and the suspect is the one who committed it. So that's what ultimately they're looking for. When you talk to dispatch, they're going to ask you a series of questions that is designed to elicit that kind of information. Did you see any weapons? First of all, they're going to ask you where you are. Palmer Police, what's the situation, or where's the location of the emergency? Even if we get nothing more than the location, at least we can start going somewhere now. After that, they're going to start asking for suspect information, suspect descriptions, weapons, that kind of stuff. So the best thing you can do is keep that stuff as fresh in your mind as possible. Things like license plates, the presence or absence of facial hair, good physical descriptors, how many people are involved, were there any weapons involved, those kinds of things. That's what dispatch is going to be trying to get from you, and they're going to pass that on to the officers. So one of the classes that we could have is just a simple of how do you report something to the police department in a way which is going to have an effect, rather than, you know, this happened 2 days ago and I've been thinking about it for a while, and I just wanted to let you know that, you know, I saw this thing, this guy, he was acting really suspicious over by the water tower, and, you know, I wanted to report it. And come to think, we've been dealing with this, we could have solved something a long time ago. And that kind of brings me to my next point. One of the things is you've got to report. You've got to tell us if there's an issue. We cannot fix it if we don't know it's broken. We don't want a society of informers. We're not going for that. But what we do need is for you to call us, so we can immediately tell the bad guy who called us and where they live, and they can come visit you at home. So, what I mean is we've got to know what's happening, and we do that by getting phone calls, by and large. So don't ever hesitate. That's why we're here. If we're not going to respond to your calls for service, we might as well not exist. So the officers are happy to do that. So what are some other things that we might talk about? Dusty. Sometimes the local number is actually faster, and here's the reason why. That's an excellent question, by the way. It was, do we always have to call 911, or should we call the local number? If it's a 911 emergency, then by all means call 911. But just do keep in mind that will get you put through to MATCOM, which is in Wasilla. They will elicit some information and then transfer the call to Palmer, and you wind up talking to our people anyway, but there's going to be a go-between. If you call 745-4811 and hit extension 1, that's going to get you through to our dispatch right away. So if it is an emergency, please use 911. If it's not, call the business line, and we'll get there just as quick. Jeannie. Okay. 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 So abandoned sure. So that you can do a couple of different things. First is, if this is happening, call us, because it's illegal to litter and it's illegal to use someone's trash can. And so, for example, if you have a dumpster and they're throwing stuff in it, it's actually a theft of services. So Yeah, we've been dealing with him, and as far as I know, there's only one in town right now. But yes, we've been dealing with that individual, and the calls do help, right? Because it. First of all, I wouldn't. We don't wish that type of lifestyle on anybody, right? So if we can help, that's one of the things we're going to try to do. When we have exhausted our ability to help, we still need to address criminal matters. And so there's several things that could come up. One is trespassing if they're crossing your property and you don't want them there. Two is littering or theft of services. Three is if we don't do anything about that because either we're not there or you don't call us or whatever, it's abandoned property, and you can address it via the civil statutes in the Alaska Administrative Code. So, yeah, you don't have to store their junk. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. What do we do with homelessness? So that's a great question. So we address behavior as law enforcement first and foremost. So whether they're homeless or not homeless isn't going to necessarily affect what we're doing. It may affect some of the services we're trying to get them in touch with. But when we're there on an investigation for disturbance or trespassing or theft, we're going to be addressing the behavior that's the issue, not the individual. So as far as what to do about the homeless, boy, that's the $64,000 question. It really is. It's primarily socioeconomic. And police have a hard time historically addressing homelessness. We just do. I mean, it's not something that we have the resources to combat. Usually, it's got to come from the community. If you want to put up a shelter, if you want to put up a kitchen, if you want to do those kinds of things, those are usually grassroots efforts that start in a community, and they don't typically start with governmental organizations because governmental organizations, they don't have the resources to do it. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a big one. So we can do certain things like encouraging people that have property that's attractive to homeless folks. Encourage them to modify their property maybe so it's not so attractive, like big stands of trees or open areas that are not easily observed, or those kinds of things. If we can clear those areas out, and this kind of goes back to the broken down car theory, the vandalized building theory. If you just leave that broken down car on the side of the road and you come back and check on it for a period of time over, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see it lose its wheels, and then it'll lose its hood, and then it'll be graffitied, and then before you know it, we have a criminal activity problem near that broken down vehicle. It can happen, and it happens with buildings as well. So yeah, that's the trick, is stopping that stuff quickly so it's not an attractive place for people to go. Ma'am. Sure. So you can call us, and we wind up either telling them to basically you need to take if it's a place they're not allowed to be, they are basically either giving a trespass notification and told to move on. And we get those from the property owners, by the way. So we don't have the authority to tell somebody they can't necessarily camp on private property. We get that from the person that owns the property. They tell us that they want this person to move along, and we move that person along. So, sure. We know how to get a hold of them. We talk to them every year. And so basically, yeah, you're absolutely right. And in that area, it's a big treed area. We speak to that individual every year. We get his permission, and basically we learn that, okay, no one is supposed to be camping on that piece of property back there. And so we use that as authority to tell people they need to move along. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, but what's not fine is we've seen lean-to shelters that had wood-burning stoves in them back in that area. And so, yep. Yeah, absolutely. There's been fires back there in camping areas, and so it's a challenge because there's a lot of acreage back there actually to cover, and you got to cover it on foot. And the officers don't often have time to just wander back around there looking for who might be around. So we tend to go back there when we get calls. So this is another reason to call, because the officers might not know about it. When they have occasion to do it, they'll park a police car and just walk around back there, but they might not always find anything. So In the back, ma'am. Yeah, same thing. If you have legal control over the property of who comes and goes, that's what we're looking for. So yeah, that'll be enough. Okay? Yes, the state troopers will. So we start on the Glen Highway south by the fairgrounds, the southern portion of the fairgrounds. We go north on the highway to mile 49, which is just on the north side of Cedar Hills. We go east on the Old Glen Highway to the bridge, and then we go west on Palmer Wausilga to about Timber Road. And there's a few other things in there. So, and then that's about 5.5 square miles or so, about 7,000 people. Now, we have a really good relationship with the state troopers, and we first respond sometimes when they ask us to, and they will come and help us out when we need help as well. So, but if it's not an emergency problem and it's in trooper land, they're the ones that are going to be responding. So, yeah. So some other good ideas for stuff. Home security is a big one, and vehicle security, parking lot security, those types of things. I mentioned earlier that a lot of stuff is stolen out of vehicles, and a lot of vehicles are stolen. We had a bad year for vehicle thefts in 2017. We had 29 of them stolen inside the city that we dealt with. Normally we have about half that. And what we're finding is that there's an increase of this during this time of year, during winter months, because these individuals have learned that people go and start their cars in the morning and they leave them running to warm them up, and they leave the key in the ignition and they leave the door open. And they're stolen right out of driveways or right out of parking lots. So, how to keep your vehicle secure, how to keep your home secure. On that topic, whether you own a business or whether you own a home or a residence or renting or live in Palmer or whatever, if you want us to come do an inspection of your building, we will be happy to come out and do it free of charge. We'll look at things like high-speed areas of approach where people can get in and out quickly, areas that might need lighting, areas that might need to have some stuff removed from them, like there's a tree that's right in front of this window, and people can hide behind that tree and wait for people to leave unobserved, and then they can get into your building. Basically, security systems, we can talk about all that kind of stuff, but please do call us. We'd be happy to come out and do an inspection of your property to let you know how you might make it a less attractive target for thieves. And ultimately, thieves are they're opportunists. They look for what's easy. So that's what we've been seeing. 7, 8 times out of 10, if we have a vehicle that's been broken into and rummaged through, it's going to have its doors that have been left open, and something attractive was on the seat. Tim. Mm-hmm. So we direct them towards agencies, not necessarily locations, and there's a few of them. High utilizers, Matsu is one, Alaska Family Services is another, My House. The officers have a resource guide, which if you guys have the meeting, we'll be happy to bring by a stack of these things. And it covers everything from homelessness to drug recovery programs, to employment, to mental health providers, that kind of stuff. And so we tend to direct them towards services, not in just in general, not a specific, like you can go to this place in Palmer, because a lot of these folks, like Alaska Family Service, they do have an office in Palmer, and we'll give them rides to it. They have a shelter for females and children in Palmer. But My House, I don't think has a facility in Palmer right now. But that doesn't mean they can't get services through My House or through High Utilizers Matsu. So we try to put them in touch with the people that are best equipped to help them. Ms. Dusty. Sure. Yeah, ultimately, that's a decision by the person in control of the property if they want this person trespassed, which means for whatever reason you decide, and it doesn't have to be a criminal one, I don't want this person back here on the property that I have control over. We will tell them that. You're not allowed back. Sometimes people limit it, like 6 months. We don't typically encourage that. At minimum a year if you're going to ask somebody not to come back. It's just too much temptation otherwise. But basically they get the thou shalt not, your persona non grata around here. And if they do come back, you give us a call and they can be arrested and taken. And that's your pretrial for criminal trespassing. Very simple procedure. So, and it happens, well, basically daily in Palmer. In the back. So Yeah, that would probably result. Now, if your cameras are date and time stamped correctly and they're good enough where you can have footage that we can actually identify an individual, right? And that often that's not the case. What we see often is somebody hunched over like this wearing a hoodie, and one person hunched over wearing a hoodie looks much the same as another person hunched over wearing the hoodie. So, but if you actually have it and we can make a positive identification of that individual, then we will probably wind up sending a charge over. I don't want to get too far down this path, but for misdemeanors not committed in our presence, you cannot arrest as a police officer, make a physical arrest as a police officer unless it's domestic violence or DUI. A lot of people don't know that. So, but if there's a theft that happens at your building and we don't witness that theft, unless, like loss prevention takes them into custody, then we can go ahead and remand them to jail. But if that person leaves and you have them on tape and you see John Doe stealing whatever, a widget from your store, and we see that person, we can't just go arrest them because we see him on the street the next day, because it was a misdemeanor not committed in our presence. Alaska statute does not allow us to make an arrest on that. Okay, a lot of people don't know it, but it's a pretty important thing to understand. Now, if it's DV and John Doe smacks his wife in your store, then we can't. Different story. So let's get back to neighborhood watch, and we can talk about a few of these other questions later. So some other good things, engraving protection, writing down the serial numbers on your expensive items, your firearms, that kind of thing, so in case there is a problem, you can let us know how we can find this stuff. Because often we do make a lot of recoveries, and we recover a great bit of stuff, whether it's tools or electronics or computers. But if you can't identify it via serial number, it makes it really hard for us to get it back to the owner, because it's hard for you to say that, yes, that iPad is mine. Or, you know, and firearms, it's particularly important. That way, dispatch can enter it into NCIC, National Crime Information Center, and if it's recovered anywhere, then we can get it back to its owner. So that's really important. Self-defense can be a topic. We're not going to put you through a self-defense course, but we can talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. 911 procedures, observation skills, like what to look for. What is out of place in your neighborhood? And this was where the back and forth that I was talking about really becomes important, because you guys know what doesn't look right. And often as not, a police investigation will start because an officer has enough experience in the area that the hairs on the back of his neck go up for some reason because something's wrong. That tow truck shouldn't have that brand new Mercedes behind it driving down the road. That's something is askew. And so we'll look into that, and that's how a lot of these things start. You guys know what that is in your neighborhood a lot better than we do. So if something's off, you can call us and tell us. And even if you just say, this is weird, we're not going to immediately run just because somebody calls and says, hey, this is weird. We're not going to, you know, throw a battering ram through their car door and drag them out kicking and screaming. We'll do a professional investigation and figure out if there's criminal activity or if it's just a new newspaper person. So, absolutely. Yep. 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 No, you're absolutely right. Thank you, Jeff. And you know, there's another way to look at this. And you know, having said that, it brought me to recall something that you know we learn all the time. But you know who's really good about informing other people when something is weird? Is criminals. Because if they think they're being surveilled, or if they think there's a new car in the neighborhood, or if there's something that doesn't look out of place to them, these people will freak out, and they will let everybody that they know in their little criminal network know, hey, that green Bronco that you see driving around from time to time, we're pretty sure it's a narc, so keep your eyes open. Okay, if they can do it, we can do it as well. And you know, it's funny, but it's not that funny, because there's a lot of investigations burned because these people talk to each other, and they will counter-surveil law enforcement. So if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? So that's an excellent point, Jeff. I mean, it's really important. And that kind of gets back to one of the things you can do at a neighborhood watch meeting, which is have these people available. So if you're going out of town and you're going to have a house sitter, or if you're going out of town and you're not going to have a house sitter, your neighborhood watch group knows, and they can let us know if something comes up. And also, please do give us a call if you're going to be going out so we can ransack your house in your absence. But do let us know if you're going to be gone and you want extra patrol in your house. We'll do it. Okay? But if your neighborhood watch group knows, that's so much the better. You can set up things like safe blockhouses on the street, so if a kiddo comes home and they lost their key and they're stuck outside, they know a safe place where they can go after school that's been basically vetted, and they can go and be safe until mom and dad get home, or you can give us a call. Those kinds of things are really important. So you can discuss neighborhood safety plans. You can have get-togethers just for social reasons. Again, one of the things that I found that really brings people together is when you as a group decide that you're going to get together and help another group of people less fortunate than yourselves. There's been a lot of groups that have done that, and that will keep a neighborhood watch group going. Is if you decide, okay, we're blessed here, we want to take our good fortune and help out charity X, Y, or Z. It's amazing the type of camaraderie that kind of thing can build. So these are all good stuff. We'll be happy to come and talk to you about whatever interests you, and let you know what type of crime trends we're seeing in Palmer or how you guys might do better, and just have a back and forth. So any questions? I mean, meeting topics, they're really kind of open. The sky's the limit. You can talk about just about anything, and we're happy to come do that. Sir. You absolutely can, and it doesn't necessarily have to be criminal related. We do try to keep it that way, so it's it doesn't lose its focus. But yeah, having different guest speakers is a great thing. Again, the officers can do it. I saw somebody from the EMS community here. I would bet that if we asked, Palmer Ambulance or Palmer Fire, if they will come to your neighborhood watch meeting and talk to us about CPR or first aid, you would get a positive response. Yeah, or Public Works. Yep, but not community development. Not them. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's here's the reason why. There's a lot of stuff that community development knows better than the police department. If you want to talk about, sign ordinances, or if you have questions about zoning, or if you have questions about those kind of stuff, you can ask them to come by, and it'll tie into Neighborhood Watch. It absolutely will. So it doesn't always have to be high-speed, low-drag stuff. There's important things that can exchange that are just seemingly routine paperwork. So, okay. So that's what we really want to do. So how do we keep this going? Because like I said, they don't always last as long as we would like. It really takes it takes some effort. And if you call us and tell us what you're trying to do, we will do our best to help you maintain that healthy neighborhood watch meeting. But really, that needs to come from the members themselves. And so a good, healthy communication and vigorous communication between neighbors is what we're looking for. That's going to keep these groups going. So, and that the meetings they're worthwhile, they're on topic, they're on point, and that they're not a chore to attend. I know how hard it is to give up your Wednesday night at 7 o'clock in the middle of the week when you've got 2 more days to go, and you might rather be somebody else, or be somebody else. I'd like to be somebody else. Or you might rather be somewhere else, right? But if it's important, we need to find a way to keep it going. So give us a call and we'll help with that. So what it is not designed to do is turn a group of neighbors into a group of vigilantes. And first and foremost, we need to establish that Neighborhood Watch is vigilant, not vigilante. We are not going to be taking direct action as a Neighborhood Watch group. We are not here to harass people. We are not here to intimidate people. We are not here to pick on certain socioeconomic groups. It is an all-inclusive group of folks that are looking to better their community and make it a better place to live, not to approach that suspected burglar, that suspected drug dealer, and get in the middle of something that you might have a hard time getting out of. That's extremely important to remember. And that'll be covered in all the meetings as well. But you can't drive it home too much. That is our job, and that's what we're privileged to do for you guys. But it's not what Neighborhood Watch is about. So, before I turn this over to passing out to questions, Belinda wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Crime Stoppers, because that's a great program that she has some information on. Eric, could you come grab the mic? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. You bet. We come to, yeah, absolutely. Just got to ask. So give us a little bit of time to make sure our schedules are clear, and yeah, we'll be happy to. Okay, Eric, everybody.
So good evening. My name's Eric Carlson. I'm the president of Crime Stoppers here, Mat-Su Crime Stoppers, and we actually service the entire borough. And Belinda is on our board. We are a board of directors of volunteers. We're a nonprofit organization, and really we're just kind of we're part of that triad of effort to fight crime. You've got the police, you've got the citizenry, and then you've got crime prevention programs like Neighborhood Watch and Crime Stoppers. And so it's just another opportunity to give people who maybe aren't comfortable for whatever reason to go to the police to maybe report things that they see or that they hear anonymously. And that's really what Crime Stoppers is, to give you that avenue that doesn't cause you to go into the police station and, and talk with the chief or Dwayne and do that face-to-face, because maybe you're too close. Maybe the individual is too close to the crime. Or maybe they're just concerned because they live in the neighborhood that maybe the individuals that are perpetrating the crime may find out who they are. Whatever the reason is, like I said, it's just another opportunity for folks to be able to anonymously go ahead and report those tidbits of information that sometimes in and of themselves seem insignificant, but together, when you get a bunch of different people reporting a number of different things, and I'm sure that both of these gentlemen can attest to that, sometimes one individual sees one thing and another sees something else in their neighborhood, and before you know it, the pieces to the puzzle all fall in together, and they know where to go and who to hook up. So like I said, Crime Stoppers, we're a nonprofit, all volunteers. We'd be happy. We also have opportunities for signage to put in your neighborhoods, to advertise, the phone number that people can call. So you get a hold of Belinda or I if you're interested in posting some of those signs in your neighborhoods as well. And we have regular meetings. We're always looking for more members. Or if you just want to come and find out more about what we're about, feel free to, again, get in contact with us. You can come to a meeting, or we can even come out and do a presentation to your groups if you'd like, if you think that'd be beneficial. Any questions in particular? Yes. I guess I wish I would have brought the statistics with me, but Belinda, you don't have one of those sheets by chance, do you? We have, if you go to our website, and it's in the flyer in there, we actually post the statistics of the success stories for the recovery of property, the amounts of drug paraphernalia or drugs that have been recovered. It is very successful. I can't tell you the dollar amounts, but it is in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars since the inception of the program, in both property that's been recovered and or interventions, in drug interdictions or solved crimes, etc. And like I said, Crime Stoppers, although that oftentimes is not the motivation for people to actually call us, but if in fact you do make a call and it does result in a conviction, you can folks can actually get a reward up to $1,000. It's amazing the number of people that actually turn that money back or don't ever come to collect it, because most people are, they get involved for all the right reasons, and we set aside, tip rewards all the time, and they sit there for a year, and folks never come to collect them, because like I said, they were just like you folks. They were just interested in participating in the community and maybe trying to make a difference. Anything else?
Thanks, Eric. So yeah, to get kind of an idea of the relationship between Crime Stoppers and the police department, we get emails from them sometimes several times a week with a Crime Stopper tip that somebody has called in, and it'll tell us that often such and such is dealing drugs out of this particular vehicle, and they move around to this particular area on this particular night. And that's enough for us to really start a great investigation. And we sometimes get some real detailed, specific information about these acts. And it could be anything from, we've had successful investigations from Crime Stoppers that have ranged anywhere from drugs to child pornography to sexual abuse to thefts to, so it really covers the gamut of things, and it's been a great program. So a lot of it has to do with stolen property. Ms. Barb. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what can you do if somebody's walking around with a weapon of some kind, a gun, a knife, a sword? And we've seen it, folks. We have seen it. We went to somebody practicing their sword play one time at, when was it? You were there. It was about 2 in the morning, right across the street from Palmer Bar, and they had a homemade 6-foot sword. And it really just didn't seem like the smartest thing to do. It's like, yeah, this is a bad idea. There's drunk people over there. Do you want to be playing with the sword here? He did. He was suggested that he go somewhere else to practice. So anyway, getting back to the question though. So either open or concealed carry of concealed weapons is currently legal in the state of Alaska. So you can still call us. And what we will probably do is start out with a drive-by of that area just to make sure there's nothing like, holy cow, we know that guy, he's a convicted felon, he can't have that shotgun, or wow, he's walking over towards the post office or the school. It's time for us to have a chat with this guy. But it may go no further than a drive-by just to make sure that everything is kind of copacetic from our area, because it is a legal thing to do. And we very much try to stay on the right side of that and not deprive people of their rights. So, but giving us a call is absolutely fine. What type of action, if any, we're going to take is going to be predicated by the circumstances we see when we show up. It all depends on the store. If the store allows it and does not have a policy of no weapons being allowed in the store, then absolutely they can. Now, you can't go into the courthouse, you're not supposed to be drinking, that kind of thing. But there are laws that cover that. But whether or not a weapon is allowed on private property is largely dictated by who owns the property. So, good questions. Yeah, very good questions. Yes? Same thing applies for all intents and purposes. Now, they're supposed to let us know as police officers. We contact them if they're carrying a concealed weapon, anything other than an ordinary pocket knife. And it's Alaska, so we assume everybody has a pocket knife. That's just the way the officers are trained. But if it's something other than that, then they are under obligation to let us know that they're carrying that, or they run into what's called misconduct involving a weapon. Yes, sir. Provided you are legally allowed to possess a weapon, then you are allowed to have that weapon on your person. Where you want to be cautious is that if, and this may or may not apply to you personally, but say you're going to stop at a school or something along those lines because you need to do business there, schools are a no-go for firearms. And so you just need to be cognizant of the fact that you have that weapon on your hip. And kind of getting not too far off the beaten path here, but a lot of these new concealable handguns that are coming out, they're built for convenience rather than they are for actually gunfighting. And so they're very small, they're very light, and you can throw one in a pocket and forget you have it. And whether you forget or not, if you're in that courthouse or if you're in that school with it, you're still violating the law. So if you're with carrying a gun comes a lot of responsibility, So you just have to be cognizant of where you are. And certain places like hospitals, they don't want handguns. They have big signs right there on the front. No weapons allowed. It's time to leave the thing in the truck or not bring it at all. Kelly. So it shouldn't be the first thing they're asking, but it might be one of the things they're asking. Yeah, I absolutely hear you. You don't have to tell them your driver's license number. If they keep trying to get it from you and are being difficult, then you give me a call and I'll pass it on to their supervisor and we'll get that problem corrected. So, like all occupations, sometimes new dispatchers and new police officers need continual training to do things correctly. And on the other hand, sometimes people who have been doing things the same way for the last 20 years are having trouble adapting to new ways of answering the phone. It might sound simple, but if you've been answering the phone, Palmer Police for the last 20 years, and now it's Palmer Police and Fire, what's the location of the emergency? That's a switch that's hard for some people. I'm not excusing it, I'm just letting you know. So, yeah, the recourse to that is to give us a call, and it's like, look, I was really just trying to report a crime. I told him who I was. You don't need my bloody driver's license number. Okay. They're trained to ask for it, but they're also they're also trained not to dwell on it. If people don't want to provide it, they don't have to. Miss Linda. Sure. So Mr. Hanson just loves coordinating meeting locations, either at the library or the ice arena or the depot. But you're right. There's a variety of venues in town that the city has control over that can probably work for that sort of thing. And so the short answer to your question is yes. Well, we'll have to see what's open, in terms of reserving it. But yeah, there's spots that can be done at. No, it's fine. Except, I mean, well, kind of look at it this way. I mean, if you're comfortable walking there and you feel it's like your neighborhood, for most of us, I mean, if you're one of these people that walks to Anchorage, that's too far. But if it's within a few blocks, that's probably the natural kind of area that we're looking for. Again, the subdivision may be too big depending on the subdivision, but a few streets, a couple of blocks, that's more what we're looking for. Yes. So we had the Palmer Business Education Launch Program started back in late aughts, so 2009, 2010, and we had some meetings there, and that actually worked fairly well. It kind of broke down by almost Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Merchants Association, that kind of stuff is how that kind of wound up happening. But if there's a group of businesses that want to get together for this sort of thing, and you're right there on Evergreen, so some of the other businesses on Evergreen, if they want to get together and have a meeting, then that is kind of like what we're talking about. That's a great sized area for us to come and discuss things, because the issues that happen on Evergreen might be completely different than the issues happen on the north part of South Alaska, because just for one thing, traffic might be an issue, and how we can make sure that people are being safe. We can talk about things like sidewalk clearing. If we have a large group of homeless that tend to migrate back and forth between some of the areas that some people have mentioned, yet they tend to be on Evergreen in those major high traffic, those major arteries. And so that might be very different than folks either maybe on Kelly's side. where he's near the Borough Building and closer to the airport. So yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. Well, it's going to be a personal journey, and we're all going to go through it while they're doing the construction. It's going to be a pretty dynamic change in that kind of gateway into Palmer from the south. There's going to be a frontage road there that's going to be completely different than what we're used to. The traffic patterns will change quite a bit, and how exactly that's going to affect the city, we're just going to kind of have to wait and see. But yeah, there's no way to look at it other than it's a big change. So it need not be a bad change. It's probably going to be a very, very good change because we could use more pavement. We really, really could. And so it's just going to need a little bit of patience while they're doing their work. So, yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing is this brings up a really good point. But there's a lot of contractors that park their vehicles out in that area, and thefts from job sites are huge for us. So we have a lot of stuff ripped off out of work trucks, a lot of tools and lumber and stuff stolen from job sites. And so, yeah, if there are folks that are in that area that have an active group going, we'd love to have that information. You have a question? So they're all the same in Palmer. An emergency dispatcher is the same as a non-emergency dispatcher. We currently have 7. 15 sworn officers, 7 dispatchers, 3 administrative staff, 2 reserves at the moment, although we're authorized up to 6, and 2 on calls. So it brings the balance up to just shy of 30, if my math is correct. Yes? So not counting myself and Dwayne because we're incompetent, you typically have anywhere from 2 to 3 working on the street at one time. This will be patrol sergeant on down. And then if it's particularly interesting, he and I will lurch forth out of our office and go try to get involved with it as well. They'll shoo us away because we're screwing up their investigation. But usually there's 2 or 3 on patrol 24/7. Now, the interesting thing about that, and here's where we need to be kind of cognizant of staffing levels, is one domestic violence call, and those 2 officers are now out of the net for sometimes several hours. Just a DUI can tie up one officer for almost half a shift if they want to go to the hospital and get their blood drawn, if there's any type of complicating factor. You used to figure a DUI from start to finish would take an officer about 3 to 4 hours from the time they make the stop to the time they're done with their paperwork on a routine DUI where nothing else comes up. So, yeah. And still, all that being said, we have a better ability to respond quickly in Palmer than troopers do that might have 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever levels they have out on the road. We just don't have the geographic area. So if an officer's working on a report in the station, he can drop what he's doing and go to your assault call. And they do that all the time. So we're usually at major emergencies in a minute or 2, sometimes less. And it's a rare occasion where something serious is happening and we don't have a couple people there and 3 or 4. Just means they got to put the paperwork on hold. And they usually look for reason to do that anyway. So, Tim. It's just because we watch your house, Tim. Yeah, I mean, they're out, and they love what they do. They get there pretty quick. They're happy to have. So. Folks, any other questions I can ask or answer? So over on these tables, we have some materials for you guys if you want to. If you're from a business, we have green metal signs. If you're from a neighborhood watch group that's not business related, we have blue metal signs. We also have some booklets and pamphlets about how to start a group, how to get a group going, some things you might talk about. What we do ask is if you're going to grab a sign, please be from the city because it has called the Palmer Police Department and our number on it. And so if you live outside the city, that sign would be kind of out of place because we want you to call the troopers if you're outside the city. But if you are in the city, please go grab a sign. Now, if you want the sign to be put up and you want to put it on your building, in your window, that kind of stuff, feel free to go ahead and do it. But also, give us a call and we can talk to you about sign placement. This will give us another opportunity to sit down with you guys and have a more personal conversation than in a large group like this. And let's get these things put up so they're all over town. We've got a number of them. So if there aren't any other questions, please feel to avail yourselves of those. And, yeah. Boss, did you have anything else?